Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Daily Tech Show. I'm your host, John Myer, and this week we've had a chance to talk with various public cloud leaders and experts from cost optimization to data visualization, including enterprise podcasters and even CTO advisors. All right, so you've heard the term multi-cloud, but what does it really mean? I mean, the definition is when enterprises or companies are utilizing multiple public cloud providers and their services. Are enterprise companies investing in multi-cloud solutions for the right reasons, or are they doing it for fear of vendor lock? What about hiring those jack of all clouds? And is multi-cloud more hassle than it's worth, or are there benefits of it? Now, I think you're going to want to stick around because I'm talking with public cloud leaders and experts from AWS about their experience dealing with multi-cloud, and is it really worth it? And yes, AWS has admitted there are multiple cloud providers. Before we begin, and I bring on that next guest, how about you hit that like, subscribe, and the notification button because we have more awesome content on the way. All right, so continuing this week-long series on multi-cloud, our next guest is a senior partner solutions architect from AWS, John. John, thanks for joining the show.
Hey, thanks, John. Appreciate it. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Yeah. So, John, before we jump into our topic of multi-cloud, would you mind giving us a little bit of information about yourself and what you do at AWS?
Sure. So I am a partner success solutions architect. As you mentioned, I work with partners and customers throughout the Southeast and try to help our customers move to the cloud, obviously. I've been working with AWS for about 3.5 years. Before that, I worked actually in the Kindle organization as a software development manager. And we did a lot of work with AWS services. So I decided to move over to AWS and help do this same solutions architect role, but for multiple customers and multiple partners. And so I work with a variety of partners, a variety of workloads from IoT to SAP to VMware migrations, specialize in migrations, databases, and analytics areas. And so I work with a lot of different customers and partners throughout the Southeast.
That's a really interesting and unique background. Thanks for giving us a little bit about yourself and what you do. Now, John, previously, I worked at AWS, and I know up until recently, multi-cloud or other cloud providers weren't acknowledged. Only during one of Andy Jassy's speeches did he say there were others. And, throughout the week, we've heard some pros and cons of going to multi-cloud. We even found that some companies in the private sector are actually utilizing multi-cloud for the right reasons. Before we jump into really the meat of the questions, what does multi-cloud mean to you, and does it exist?
So yeah, I mean, we have to be realistic. Customers have certain things that they've started with, and they may already be going down one cloud provider and then deciding to move to another. They may be deciding, different business units have different needs. And so sometimes one business unit is already going down the path of one cloud provider, and then another business unit comes along and decides to go down a different cloud provider. And that's okay. I know we want everybody to move to AWS, but we also know that realistically, we have to get people to understand the benefits first. And, one of the things we do see is, especially with certain workloads that people may have running locally, they think they have to use one cloud provider and realize after we go through this process of discovery with them that, maybe a different cloud provider would be better for them, for their workload. So I think, I know it exists. We obviously know it exists. We also know that, we think we have the best services and the most broad amount of services for all the types of workloads. What we're trying to do is make sure we answer the customer's questions and the customer solution. So, as you know, coming from AWS, that we work backwards from the customer. So whatever the solution comes up with, it may mix multiple cloud providers. I do a lot of funding requests for partners that also work toward how do I integrate with, this security model that's already in another cloud provider. And, that's part of our architecture. How do we integrate with them? Maybe eventually they move over, but there's reasons that they might not want to move their security model all the way into AWS. And so we'll integrate that when we're doing our architecture. So that's kind of a broad question, broad answer to it. But I think it kind of, basically we're looking from the customer backwards and seeing what they need. And really, that's the best solution for them. Sometimes is multiple cloud providers.
John, so coming from AWS, I'm fully aware of all their leadership principles. Customer obsession, number one. I enjoy it. I think it instills in a lot of companies. We have a mutual friend from the CEO and co-founder of Bellflare Technologies, Tia, and she actually echoed almost exactly what you said in the case of working backwards. What are the customer needs? All right. What do they need? What is the best solution for the customer? But the other thing that you touched on, and she said the same thing, which I find is very interesting because some of the other public cloud leaders and experts I've interviewed, we didn't talk about the different business units within each company and that their needs may be unique and different than the entire company's process of going with one cloud provider versus the other. So I really find that really unique in this case. The question I have is when I have multiple cloud providers, right? What are some of the challenges that companies are facing when using both of them?
So that's one of the problems. It's not necessarily a problem. I mean, if you have enough people and their expertise is one cloud provider, and then you have another, like you said, business unit going to another area, you may have two teams working in both cloud, each cloud provider and understanding those services. One of the main things is the training is, how do you do certain things? Architecturally, it's probably the same, but the exact calls, the exact services you're going to use in each cloud provider is going to be different. And instead of doubling those and saying, oh, I have multiple cloud providers, I've got to have these people that are experts in both, you can do one of two things. You can split those roles and say, these people are experts in one, these people are experts in another. And we do provide a lot of training when we move people to the cloud. That's one of our biggest things is let's offer you a whole bunch of training to make sure you know how to use our services properly. The other thing is that, the integration sometimes is a little sticky. If one person knows their cloud and says, hey, this is exactly how we do it. And then the other person says, well, this is how we do it. Is there a third party, a partner, an ISV, a technology type partner that maybe links those things together for us so you don't have to develop that work? So there's, one would be training of both people, or knowing both services from each cloud provider, that you have to address that. You have to address, is there a technological challenge between the two cloud providers that a partner or somebody else can provide for you and help you? And then the third would be, so the other part of that is you don't have to know all the services of that are provided by every cloud provider. You need to know the services for your solution, as we mentioned. So that's where we come in as solutions architects and can help say, here's what you need to know. Let me help you with those. We'll do, like Tia mentioned, we'll do Immersion Days together and make sure people are trained and understand hands-on how things work. And so they can actually hit the ground running. And then if they're we have a lot of reference architectures that use the multi-cloud environment. So what we want to do is use those. We have startups really quick starts that we can do that will automatically provision your environment that'll integrate the two cloud providers or multiple cloud providers. And then, again, our partners are our friends, and we want to leverage them as much as possible. But we have specialists in each area. So, for example, in ours, we will have I might bring in a Microsoft specialist if we are working with people that are already in Azure. And so we want to make sure that we have the right people involved all the time to make sure that those people that are going to be using the multi-cloud environment know all the details, and we can help them out from training through partner through execution.
Now, you mentioned the skill set, but also one of the key things with AWS in the beginning, multi-cloud did not exist, but they found out it was not customer obsessed because other customers are using it. Now let's help those customers out, because the right solution might ultimately be AWS, and in some cases might be another provider integrated with AWS. So I like the change. I'm glad we finally kind of went towards that route. Now, the other question I have is, what about this, the controls and managing this multi-cloud environment, providing governance? What are some of the issues you might be seeing there, or some of the solutions that have been provided or suggested?
Yeah, so I'll tell you that I'm not a security expert, but one of the things we do initially always is a well-architected review. And the security pillar of our well-architected review is always number one for mitigation. We make sure that if there are any items that we find that aren't being addressed correctly, and it could be multi-cloud, it could be all in AWS, it could be all in another provider. It doesn't really matter. We're asking questions about, like you said, governance and what are the special rules around you. Is it a healthcare, application? Do we need HIPAA requirements taken care of? Is it, PCI data? We just need to know from the customer what data they have, what their requirements are, and how are they handling it currently. And then we go through and mitigate those. Now, the other part of that question you asked is, how, what do we do to, you got multi-cloud environments. So for example, we have integrations into Active Directory. So if somebody is using Active Directory for their security internally, that's fine. That's a third-party provider we link to, and when you go to AWS, we can handle all that. So you don't have to duplicate all those users in another cloud environment. So along those lines, we look at those. We also look at what the services are that they're using to make sure that those are secure. We get security certificates for different reasons, for different services, and we publish those so that we can make sure that if there is a governance issue, we make sure that the services they're using in the environment they're working in are going to be covered, and an audit would not trigger any red flags for that customer. So I think that's in general what we're trying to do, and we use some partners also are managing their services, their MSPs, and managing the services for customers. So those partners then have links into multiple cloud providers, so they can show a single pane view for that customer of how the security is working, if they don't want to use one cloud provider versus the other for looking at their views of what services and security rules they're running. They can look at it through an MSP sometimes.
I know a couple MSPs that provide that single pane of glass. Now, John, you mentioned well-architected review. Having done plenty of them myself, a lot of the questions are not just centered around AWS, but are generalized on how you handle certain security incidents, as well as performances, metrics. So well-architected works for multi-cloud, correct?
Right. Yeah. And we tell our partners, even the partners that are out there working with customers that aren't AWS customers, do a well-architected review. And we actually use that. Some partners use that as a marketing tool. They start with a well-architected review because they're going to ask general questions of, how do you handle security? How do you handle your operations? Do you have a provision? Do you have a plan for disaster recovery? And then going further into costs and in other areas, we can help them further. But those main pillars that we're trying to hit are generic enough that we want to know how you do things in your business and how you handle things right now. And are any of those raising a red flag? And if so, let's mitigate those right away. And sometimes it's with AWS services. Sometimes it's just raising a flag to the customer that you need to address those, and maybe a partner can help you out with those, because it's going to come up eventually if you don't handle them now. And
John, you also echoed something that Tia said, which, you know what? you guys are on the same wavelength. She said, data defines the cloud approach. What data do you have? Where does it need and where does it reside? And that will define if you want one cloud provider or multiple, depending on it. Very interesting.
Yeah. And along those same lines is, if people have data, and they may have a lot of data, but they don't have it consolidated in one place. So it may be that connect, for example, to, AWS could create the data lake in AWS, and it could be getting data from multiple cloud providers so that their data lake and analytics is being run in AWS, but they want to continue running their day-to-day operations in another cloud provider. That could be a starting point because it depends what, like Tia said, the data that they want to use. What do you want to use it for? That's another problem we also face is that, we also have a lot of customers that say, I'd like to use, I want to use ML on my data, and they have no idea what they're going to use it for. So that's one of those working backwards solutions that we try to find out. What is it that you want to do with your data? That will kind of drive where that data resides and how it's stored.
Interesting. So, John, I've got one more question, actually two more questions, and we're going to wrap this up. I know you're familiar with Control Tower or landing zone, and you don't have to answer this one, or you can say you're not sure. I know, but you think AWS Control Tower might ever be multi-cloud available?
Boy, I don't know. That's a tough one. I would say I don't. I don't know. I think the main problem would be the underlying services that are being used, and whether we would really want to, whether anybody would allow us to put security rules in their cloud environment so that you could control it in one place. I don't know, and I don't really know the roadmap, so I can't really answer that.
No problem, John. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but being that I was a big proponent of Control Tower, I thought of, wow, this is another customer feature request that could be really a game changer for them. AWS, if you are listening to this podcast, I would like to take full credit for this release. Then, John, remember, I said it first.
I will do that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a great idea. We always are trying to show those, single pane views, but we also have, integration issues in some points. So who knows? Maybe in the future.
All right,
John, maybe your picture will be the icon that's used.
Oh, John, I could think of some unique names for it. John, last question. Company going or wants to go multi-cloud, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think the main thing is, you have to know where you're at right now, and you have to know where you want to be in 3 to 5 years. And I think working from that will determine whether or not your cloud environment should change, or it might not even be a cloud environment. So that's the other issue we have is, some is on-prem, and, I worked for AAA for 15 years running a technical team. And, I had all those people, the systems admins, the DBAs. I had to budget for that hardware all the time. So I always talk to them about, get rid of all those costs and use those people to run your business. And that's a more efficient use of those people than, staging machines, testing them, getting ready for a cutover every 3 years because they're depreciated. So between moving to that cloud, moving to a different cloud, you may be in one cloud environment, and you may want to look at costs too. We always look at costs. Who's offering the best deal? Is it a long-term deal? Is it, a one-time credit? There's a lot of cost environment or cost artifacts that are around these environments that can also impact the move to one cloud provider versus another. And so we always try to use that to look at your licensing environment as well. So between the licensing, where you want to be, what's your budget look like, how many people do you have, all those things will trigger which cloud environment you probably are going to end up in.
John, excellent advice. Now, folks, remember, if you like what you see, don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, and the notification because we have more awesome content on the way. John, I want to thank you for joining the show and giving us your insight as a senior partner solutions architect at AWS. Thanks for joining. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, John. This was fun. Appreciate it.
Yes, we'll have to do it again.